Hi, in this video I'd like to spend some time talking about a topic that isn't really related to any particular module, but it's really important that you understand this topic before moving forward. The topic is comments. Okay, I want you to look at this program for a second and see if you can figure out what it does. Looking at the variable names, you can probably guess that the program does something geometry related. And after staring long enough, and maybe ducking into a math textbook, you might come to realize that this program computes the area of a trapezoid. Now, if you looked at this program and your reaction was, what? Don't worry, the point of this exercise was to show you that reading code is hard. And it might be easier to determine what this program does if we're also given a file that describes the program in plain English. But this still isn't great since we have to constantly switch back and forth between the English and the code. Imagine doing this for a more complicated program. It would quickly become infeasible. What would be great is if there were a way to intersperse English and code. Well, there is, and it's called... Yay! Comments. A comment is text in a program that is ignored by the Python interpreter. Let's take the description from the last example and inject it into the program itself using comments. When we do that, it looks like this. There are a couple of types of comments here, the red one and the green ones, and I'll explain what they are in a second. First, let's talk about how comments work. In some of the videos for this course, you saw a magic little red arrow that executed your program one line at a time. The magic red arrow represents something I've mentioned a few times called the Python interpreter. When you write a Python program, there is another program called the interpreter that goes through your program line by line and executes it. Turns out the interpreter is pretty smart and can skip over anything that looks like a comment. So how does it know what to skip? This brings us back to the two types of comments. The first type is a multi-line comment, so called because it can span multiple lines. When the interpreter sees three free-floating quotation marks in a row, it knows to ignore everything it sees until it sees three more quotation marks. You often see a multi-line comment at the beginning of a program to describe what the program does and who wrote it. Then you have the single-line comment, which begins with a pound sign. When the interpreter sees a pound sign anywhere except in quotation marks, it assumes that it can ignore the rest of the line. Single-line comments are commonly written in the code itself to describe specific parts of the code. As a programmer, you should always write comments in your programs for a number of reasons. First, out in the wild, programming is often done by teams of people rather than just one person. Comments will make it easier for your teammates to read and build upon your programs. Second, it's also probable that many projects you work on will be inherited by other people in the future. These people will need to determine what your code does. And third, comments make it easier for you to read your own code, especially if you take time away from it and then revisit it later. The goal of comments is readability, so just having comments isn't enough. You need to make sure that your comments do, in fact, contribute to the overall readability of your program, and you don't have too many comments, which might clutter your program and make it less readable.